In Severance, Van Allen gained a charismatic partner who managed the business. What one lacked, the other supplied. Leonardo da Vinci wrote that an arch is two weaknesses which together make a strength. So it was with their partnership. This kind of balance between partners had given rise to many of the most famous firms, including McKim, Mead & White, Carrere and Hastings, Sullivan and Adler, and Burnham and Root. Affectionately called the steersman of the ship, as William Mead was, or the plumber, as John Carrere once said of his role in the firm, partners like Severance managed the firm's staff, smoothed the ruffled feathers of the clients, oversaw the finances, and dealt with the less glamorous engineering elements, including heating, plumbing, and electrical details. Severance's role, quite simply, was to keep the ship sailing and the big commissions coming. Like Sanford White and Thomas Hastings, Van Allen was helpless when it came to business affairs, but he could draw brilliantly, and he distinguished his firm from the host of others through his inventive designs. With each passing year, Van Allen's plans grew bolder. Breaking with tradition, he chopped off useless cornices from the tops of buildings and set windows flush with the wall. Architects in New York stopped by to see his designs. When Richard Haviland Smythe came by the J.M. Giddings store on Fifth Avenue, a writer asked the architect, "Well, how do you like it?" Smythe replied, "How I don't like it is what you mean. Van Allen's stuff is so darn clever that I don't know whether to admire it or hate it." Similar things were said of White and Hastings in their time. As it turned out, however, this partnership between Van Allen and Severance was not immune to the perils that threaten many successful firms. Petty jealousies, questions of direction, money, and who was really responsible for the firm's success. For the two architects, both of whom enjoyed more than their share of ego, a rift eventually developed. The fact was they were very different men. Van Allen spent evenings at the Architectural League of New York, debating with his fellow architects, many of whom he'd studied with in Paris. Severance went to the Metropolitan Club after a long day, passing his time with industrialists and financiers, men who could give him jobs. When Severance needed a drink, he often joked about his command of a language his partner spoke fluently. "All my French is coming back to me. Entrez la boîte." The differences that made the two effective as partners also diminished their chances of resolving the conflicts that arose between them. By their 10th year, the architects had long since left behind the personal warmth that had characterized their early partnership, when they'd spent weekends together in the country, and Van Allen had asked Severance to be the best man at his wedding. In 1923, they became embroiled in a lawsuit over their commission on the Hotel Empire on 63rd Street. The owners had canceled their contract, complaining that the plans, for which Van Allen was responsible, had been consistently late. They lost out on more than half their fee. Then, the February 1924 issue of Architectural Record finally arrived with the review of the Bainbridge building. The critic Leon Solon liked the building, praising the design as most satisfying and an imaginative reaction. He thought that it made a bold new step in design, particularly because of the facade's light treatment, which revealed the building's steel structure rather than hiding it behind some heavy masonry details. Solon concluded, "In William Van Allen's work, we welcome the identification of design with structure after its long architectural dissociation." The problem with the review was that Van Allen was the only one praised. It mentioned Severance only as a name on the partnership's letterhead. One can appreciate the bitterness this engendered in Severance. After all, Bainbridge Colby, the former Secretary of State under Wilson, was a personal friend, and short of this relationship, the commission never would have happened. Not only had Van Allen earned all the recognition for the building, but the Review also established Severance and Van Allen architects as a practice showing the greatest energy in shaking off the shackles of purposeless convention. As Raymond Hood, one of the decade's leading architects, learned in the first days of his practice, clients often disdained innovation. The story went that Hood had submitted preliminary sketches for a bank commission he hoped to win in Providence, Rhode Island. Hood was known as somewhat of a rebellious and bold designer, and the bank president came back to him and said, "We're going to ask McKim, Mead, and White to do it." "But you can't," said Hood. "Those men are dead. If it's an old firm name you want, I'll give you one. How about Praxiteles, Michelangelo, and Hood?" Many big-spending clients whom Severance sought and wooed were like Hood's banker. They closed the door on firms that strayed too far from classical tenets. Severance decided he didn't need a partner who upset convention. He could just as easily hire talented designers who would follow his lead and keep all the profits to himself. A few short months after the Review, the partnership officially ended, and so did their friendship. Van Allen moved out of their office, never to return. Within months, Van Allen sued Severance. They skirmished over money and how the client list would be divided. The suit dragged out over a full year. Eventually, Severance won. Van Allen appealed the decision but failed to have it overturned. Neither man took on another partner in his career, nor did either forget what had happened between them. Several years later, in 1929, Severance and Van Allen were locked into yet another struggle, one that would change New York's skyline and challenge each man to build higher than anyone had gone before. It would also lay down the gauntlet for a third skyscraper to stretch even higher. It began as a contest between their egos and became a race involving many players, each with their own agendas. They included two rival automobile giants, a young Wall Street titan in it for the game, a political hero on the mend, and two brothers out to crown their building careers. As the long shadow of the Great Depression began to darken the edge of the Roaring Twenties, the race to build the world's tallest building captured the nation's imagination. To understand this chase into the sky, one must look further back in history, far beyond the building of the first skyscrapers in America. In man's earliest days, he constructed basic shelters of wood, leaves, and earth. As the burden of survival lightened, he began to develop beauty and grandness in his designs. Man wanted to make his mark on the world, and the structures he built became a statement of self. So humankind built, at times with great ambition. On the Nile's west bank, the Great Pyramid of Giza, reaching 450 feet high with over 2 million stone blocks, served as the tomb for King Khufu. On a hilltop in Athens, the Greeks built the Parthenon, a temple that towered over the city below. Triumphal arches in the Colosseum marked Rome, while on the hills of San Gimignano, rival Italian families built hundreds of towers, one taller than the next, to declare their power. In Southeast Asia, the Khmer Empire erected massive tiered stone spires, the earthly representation of Mount Meru, where their Hindu gods lived. Great Chinese pagodas, French cathedrals, ziggurats, lighthouses, bell towers, and even the simple steeple that stands above a countryside village, what they may not have in common purpose or scale, they shared in command of height. This height expressed preeminence, whether of their gods, their engineering skill, their power, their wealth, or their position above others. The demand for height was equally strong in America. In the days before the Revolutionary War, rebels raised tall liberty poles in city squares, risking the bayonets of British soldiers to declare their freedom.